The satirists have been out in force after the PM and Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris spoke to the media outside the Titanic Museum, prompting an influx, of course, of sinking ships and rearranging the deck chair comparisons online. And a grim tally has now been reached because a record 76 Tory MPs have now said that they will not fight at the election on July the 4th. And Labour, meanwhile, has had its own battles after expelling Jeremy Corbyn from the party for running as an independent. And meanwhile, Reform UK are yet to unify on the role of Nigel Farage. Well, to discuss all this, I'm now joined in the studio by the political editor at The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova. Welcome to the studio. Delighted to have your company. Let's start with this grim tally. 76 has been achieved. 4 today. Started off with Sir John Redwood. Then, of course, it was Craig McKinley, who bravely returned to Parliament just this week. Then it was Greg Clark, and now recently Sir David Evans. Bexley Heath, a very safe, healthy majority. This is now looking more and more like a 97 repeat. And the next question is, does that mean we're heading for a Blair-style wipeout?
Well, I think, look, in some respect, at this stage in the political cycle, it's no surprise that some MPs want to stand down. They've been there for a long time. But as you say, it's the surprising names. I mean, people like Hugh Merriman, for example, who would have been a rising star in any other context. I think two things are happening. One, you've got Rishi Sunak so far behind in the polls, but also a real problem of party management. Yeah. So, there have been so many complaints from the parliamentary party that number 10 for so long just hasn't been listening to them, hasn't been reaching out to them properly. There are allegations about Sunak and the timing of this election that he just doesn't care about the party, is willing to take them to Armageddon. And I think all of that feeds in to this element of exodus. I mean, there are a lot of MPs who are saying, well, why do we want to stick around? And
some surprising names there. Sir John Redwood, I mean...
Well, that's a historic one, he's of the Thatcher era, and he's been around for so long. So, you're losing a lot of grandees, and I think the big question is, what is the party going to look like after the election? However many seats they win, and this is what every single potential rival who's gearing up to replace Rishi Sunak, assuming he loses, is trying to do. They're all meeting candidates. They're all reaching out to associations, trying to shape the future of the party.
And that brings me neatly to my next question. Earlier on today, we heard the rumour that Frosty had been frozen out. Lord Frost, of course, Mr Brexit, the great Frost, as Boris Johnson called him. Of course, he's in the Lords, but for yourself, he's wanted to stand as an MP. Earlier on today, we heard that as being blocked. 93 vacant seats. His name wasn't on it. Rishi Sunak said today on the campaign trail that's not the case. But he's precisely the kind of red wall, Brexity, red meat Conservatives a lot on the right would like to see winning a seat to give them a foothold to rebuild the party. Is there the rumour, persistent rumour, that people like him are being frozen out of the party?
Well, this is certainly a concern. David Frost, there are so many people who want him to be an MP, so many people who see him as a potential future leader even of the party, just because he is a heavyweight, he has this already background in government, and he has a lot of respect from people in certain wings of the party. But, yes, he has been trying to get a seat, and it looks like he hasn't got it. I don't think he has been blocked, as Sunak says, but certainly they haven't made it easy for him, I think is probably the accurate way to put it. If they wanted to, they would have made him a candidate. For him, it's a big gamble giving up a seat in the Lords, so he effectively has to know for sure that an association will say yes to him. He can't just be presented as a bog-standard candidate, which is understandable. And it sounds like Downing Street just doesn't really have an interest in making that happen.
And it's worth, Anna, just talking people through the process. So he currently is in the Lords. Yes. He would need to surrender that position with the guarantee of being selected as a candidate, and then he would still need to get elected to get in. So it would be a big outlay from him, but it's one that, as you understand it, he's prepared to do and he wants to do.
My understanding is that yes, whether or not he has taken the personal decision that this is not the right time as well, because there are a lot of people who want to run, but they're looking at, just like the people who are leaving, they're looking at the current state of the polls, they're looking at the state of morale in the party and thinking, well, maybe I'll hold fire and wait.
And that brings us to the next question. We're talking about Bexley Heath there. Majority of only 12,500. It's been a Tory seat since 2005. David Evanet stood since 97. He knows what it's like to lose to Blair. Is there any such thing now as a safe Conservative seat?
Well, I mean, that's what everyone says. You know, there is no such thing as a safe seat. Of course, there are going to be safe seats. And of course, there are seats where the vote will be split between Labour and Liberal Democrats, or where reform won't quite have a stronghold. I think one of the reasons that Rishi Sunak has chosen July is because he thinks that reform wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah.
So it's a tactical move there. So. But no, I mean, and the problem is what decision is going to be made to actually, what seats is the Conservative Party going to focus on right now in defending?
Can I ask you about the Reform Party? We've got the leader of Reform, Richard Tice, who'll be in your seat there in about an hour's time. Do you think that Rishi Sunak has outmanoeuvred the party? Nigel Farage admitted that very thing last night. 6 weeks, not enough time for a small party to hit the ground and have a serious chance. Do you think the party's over for reform? Do you think Rishi Sunak called the election? Everyone was scratching their heads on Wednesday. Why has he gone so early? Was it to cook the goose of Richard Tice?
I think it is. I mean, I know from speaking to people around Sunak that was one of the calculations. Whether or not reform would realistically have had much of a change in their fortunes in the next few, given it 3 months more.
But they could have taken a lot more. They could have done a lot more damage, and therefore made the remaining Conservative Party after the election much more burnt to the ground.
I think the issue is more the single issue that reform focuses on, which is immigration. So if they had waited till the autumn, what you would have done is you would have seen a lot more people come over small boats. So that would have, of course, given Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson ammunition to hit the Conservatives where it hurts. So I think in that sense, yes. But of course, as a small new party in this effectively two-party system, it's always going to be very hard for a small challenger to come along and make a big dent.
And it's an election trail. It's an election that Rishi Sunak called. He didn't have to call it. It's been called the greatest gamble of his entire political career. Some are calling it a suicide mission. Anna, what's the mood like within the Conservative ranks at the moment? Is it the last days of the empire?
Well,
is it that kind of
look,
feeling?
I've been in Parliament the last 2 days, and the mood in Parliament is sort of a little bit sad for a lot of Tory MPs, just because even the ones who knew they were going they basically thought they had guarantees that they would have another couple of months. So it's that human element of they haven't had a chance to say goodbye. They're not going to have a chance to, most of them, make a last statement in the Commons. A lot of MPs are absolutely mutinous. The Red Wall MPs feel they've been abandoned. And I think that there's a perception that perhaps Downing Street does not care so much about the handling of those elements in the party.
Anna, I spend a lot of time looking at what people say on the comments, on newspaper articles, on the Mail on Sunday, the Telegraph, GB News on your say. I sense amongst your readers there is a lot of anger with the Conservative Party. There is a feeling that they had an 80-seat majority, seems so long ago now, doesn't it? And they have squandered it. Do you think that's fair to say?
Well, I mean, I remember when they got the majority, everyone thought that politics would be back to normal after the years of upheaval with Theresa May and everything post the Brexit vote. Instead, we had COVID. There's a lot that can be said for mismanagement in the Conservative Party, but also there was this absolute shock that came along 2 months into Boris Johnson's majority term. And I think any government with any majority would have struggled to deal with that.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. That's the Deputy Political Editor at the Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova. And please come back and join us again.